All right, everybody. Welcome to a live episode of Mike's Money Picks. This is our third college football live show. I am joined by Zach Green, aka Big Country DFS, and he is here with me, and we are going to break down the Saturday main slate for week two. Zach, how did week one go for you?
Well, not the greatest. I had, one of those times where you have everything right, like the right idea, the right plays, but none of them in the right combination together.
Yeah, personally, I kind of rode the roller coaster slate by slate. Like I did not have a good Thursday night, but had a real good Friday night, got me back up. And then Saturday, I was pretty much even on the main slate, lost some money on the night slate, but then recouped it on the late night slate. So, it was just kind of one of those up and down weeks where you just kind of end up back where you started. But,
Yeah,
if you break even every time, that's not the end of the world. I mean, it doesn't feel great, but you get to keep doing what you're doing. And honestly, if you're playing this for anything other than fun, then you're probably in the wrong business.
yeah, for sure. And then we had the injuries. I still did okay on Friday, even with Claiborne getting hurt. But
Yes, I legitimately had 80% Claiborne, and I thought I was gonna be like just totally cooked, but I got so much else right. I was all over Jackson Arnold. I had a lot of the Baylor guys in that Auburn Baylor game. I had a ton of Haynes King. Haynes King like really bailed me out.
yeah, me
And
too.
so that was kind of able to make up stuff. The Saturday slate, I had a lot of good things, but I had like you were saying, it just never really came together, and it was just kind of just treading water. But anyway, that was week one. Now, as Bill Belichick would say, we're on to week two. So, and I'd hope for his sake he's on to week two. Good Lord, that
Yeah,
was
it was
bad.
terrible.
That was one of those like it's kind of like a train wreck when it was on my TV Monday night. Like I didn't really want to watch it, but I couldn't look away just because it was so bad. So hopefully old Bill and his girl can get things figured out down there at North Carolina. Anyway, we're on to week two. So here on this show, I had somebody ask me last week. They're like, "Hey, like, what is the difference between the show that you do on Tuesday nights and the live show? Like, if I were to watch one, what would I be looking for?" Well, the Tuesday night show is more of an overview, bird's eye view of every player, every game, every situation that you need to know, where the information's like flying fast and the takes are flying, right? This show is a more in-depth, more strategic discussion where we go back and forth. We talk about specific players, talk about specific plays. And if you're watching live with us, if there's anything you want us to talk about in terms of strategy, in terms of players, in terms of plays, that is your opportunity to ask the question, because we're here for you guys to help you guys go kill it here on this Saturday main slate. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the sheet here. But while I'm doing that, Zach, can you tell the people where they can find these wonderful sheets?
Yeah, so it's at Big Country DFS on Twitter. Got the background now that I got a webcam and not having to use the iPad anymore. And then also Big Country DFS or Discord, sorry. And then the Fantasy Corner Discord, I'm in there with you guys as well. So I just kind of post it all over, and like we mentioned, it's always free. There's obviously a link if you want to, if you feel inclined, you hit big or whatever you want to tip, that's fine. But it's definitely free. Just love doing it. Love helping people. Love college sports. So
And if you're somebody who's just starting out, or if you're somebody who's real scatterbrained, to me, this sheet's one of the best organizational tools because it's got all the names you need to know in one spot, really organized, and really, you didn't really. I think the best way to phrase this, I just started seeing these with you this year. It really helps me when I am hand building to look and have those lists, right? Now, once I get into the optimizer, look at the projections, the process is a little bit different. But if I'm hand building a lineup, being able to look at a sheet like this to organize my thoughts is so helpful. So make sure you check that out if you're interested. So before we start talking about individual players, let's talk about some of the game environments on this slate, right? So we talked about last week a lot of the differences in strategy for non-conference play slates versus conference play slates, right? When you have a ton of blowouts versus when you have a ton of projected close games. This one is actually kind of somewhere in the middle between what we had week one and what we have, or probably in like a week 7 or week 8 where everybody's playing conference games, right? Looking at this slate, I see about 4 games that I want to make sure I build a game stack of. Are you feeling the same way about that? Is there more or less games that you want to stack, or just what is your general thoughts about the game environments on this slate?
Yeah, probably. I'm assuming we might be thinking about the same ones, but that first
Okay.
one, the SMU Baylor, uh, you know, I don't think SMU is that much improved from last year's defense. And Baylor, we know, I mean, Jackson Arnold just ripped them apart. And so Kevin
Mm-hmm.
Jennings is exact same kind of quarterback. He's going to run, he's going to pass, and that's why you can already see he's in my core. But that's one of my favorite. Then NC State game is one of my favorite. The only thing with that is I'm not too sure about Virginia quarterback. If Chandler Morris doesn't play, I don't really know a whole lot about him. So that might take it
Yeah.
down a notch. Syracuse, UConn, I think both of that could be a shootout. And then I do think, and maybe a little homer here, but I do think Oklahoma State can keep it closer than 28 points.
You
Uh,
think so?
so, yeah, I mean, hopefully I'm not just you know what I don't know, just being biased, but 28 just seems like a lot. I know Oregon looks really good,
Mm-hmm.
but
My
yeah,
first instinct when I saw that line was like, you generally don't see two P4 teams have a line that big. And I was not all that impressed with Oregon last week. So I was thinking immediately, like, hey, like, might want to get in on that. And then I looked at what Oklahoma State did, and I was a little bit turned off by what I saw them do. Like Zane Flores, not exactly a great stat line. They played a ton of guys at the skill positions. But you think that they're going to be able to hang with Oregon?
yeah, I think part of the issue with the spread and part of the just looking at the box score, people don't realize that Hingie got hurt
Mm-hmm.
early in the first quarter, and now Laporta is out. You know, he broke his foot, and so Flores he was expected to play some, but Hingie was doing great until he got hurt. So I don't think Flores was actually going to come in.
And so now they have the full game plan, the full
Yeah,
playbook designed for Flores.
uh,
That makes a
yeah.
lot of sense. Because
So
I'll be honest, on the Oregon side, Moore didn't do a whole lot that impressed me. They didn't play Mekhi Hughes at running back, who was the big prize transfer that everybody was drafting in the first round in best ball. And then none of the receiving weapons really stood out offensively. And so, like, I was looking at Oregon, and I'm like, I don't really want to stack this team. I don't really want to go after this game environment. So I'm probably going to be fading into DFS, but I'm very tempted to put in a bet on it, and you might have swayed me on the 27.5, taking the points.
And one thing to mention real quick, with since we're on that game,
Mm-hmm.
is like you mentioned with Hughes. Well, I just saw a video from Dan Lanning, basically saying the reason, because obviously beat reporters like, why he ran for over 1,000 yards at Tulane, why is he not and he just basically said some coach speak that we got a lot of guys and all that stuff. And so I think one of the things that I'm probably going to be fading that is looking chalk is Noah Whittington.
I agree.
Everyone's just going straight to him based on the box score, and we could see Hughes get 20 carries. We don't know what's going to happen with that right now.
Yeah, it's just a lot of unknowns, and we're going to talk later about kind of my thoughts on chalk in DFS. Yeah, I'm not. I'm kind of out on Oregon in DFS. Now, back to the game stacks we were talking about, right? I love the idea of stacking NC State as long as Virginia's quarterback Chandler Morris is healthy. Because with what we saw last week, NC State and ECU, State comes off to this roaring start, right? Like they look great in the first quarter. I'm looking and seeing what CJ Bailey's Heisman odds are in the first quarter. He was looking that good. And then they get up early. Dave Doran does this thing where he takes his foot off the gas. They just play conservatively. They let ECU creep back into the game. And I think a team like Virginia, if Virginia can keep the pedal to the metal, keep the game close, State will continue to be aggressive. They'll continue to go downfield. Bailey will continue to rack up points. And I think that could turn into one of the best game environments of the week.
Yeah, I agree. We just got to see who's starting. And and we have a cheap receiver to pair with them too.
Yes, going to talk about him later as well. And then also, I'm probably going to build a stack of this Missouri-Kansas game just because from what we've seen so far, we've got two cheap quarterbacks that run a lot in Daniels and in Prabula. And so you've got cheap quarterbacks that run, and you don't really need to play them stacked, even though once in each of the 2 games so far, one of the Kansas receivers has gone off. I think that presents a really unique opportunity where you could just play the quarterbacks and hope to capture all the touchdowns rushing and passing through them. And that could be a really sneaky way to build a lineup.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I was just reading the comment. Myron said that, he said that Jerry Ratcliffe, I guess a beat writer, said that Chandler Morris is good to go from the coach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so glad to hear that. Also, glad to see Myron in the chat. Myron, I know he was in a few of my college basketball live streams back in the spring. So glad to see you, Myron. Glad to have you here. I'm glad to have you playing college football DFS as well as college basketball, right? But yeah, I mean, you got to have the nickname Big Country from somewhere, right?
Yeah, that's where it came from. Growing up, I was playing basketball, and everybody was like, he looks like Big Country Bryant Reeves. And I remember a game, just YMCA basketball when I was like in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just, because I was one of those people, that grew way before everyone else. So I was like foot taller than everyone. So we got like 25 points in a game.
Yeah, so you were just that guy that was just camping under the basket and just going right up with it. All right, so let's go ahead now. We talked about the game environments. So I kind of want to save our like ownership chalk conversation for when we get to the wide receivers. But let's go position by position. I think I know where you're going to go with this. But if I told you on this slate, hey, you can only play 2 quarterbacks, you get 2 of them. Who are you choosing? Go.
Okay, the first one's easy. Kevin Jennings.
I had a feeling that's where you were going to go.
Yeah, but the second one, that's a little tricky for me because there's so many. Last week, I didn't feel this way at quarterback. I didn't feel like there were so many guys I wanted to play. But totally this one, I like Hammond. If he goes for Morton, I like Robertson to stack with Jennings. I like Simmons, even though it's on the road. I like Pabula, and I still think Jalen Daniels is way too cheap. I also think C.J. Bailey is way too cheap.
Yes.
So if I had to pick, it'd probably be Robertson just because of that game stack. But it kind of depends how my lineup, because you got Pabula and you got Daniels down there for cheap.
Yes.
So if I needed somebody cheap, I'd go that route.
So I think I'm kind of in somewhat alignment with you. I think on paper, the 2 best plays are Kevin Jennings and Bo Pabula. Like, I just think you got great game environments, you got mobility, you got stacking partners. They're very affordable in terms of their price tag for what they can do from an upside standpoint. I think those are probably on paper the 2 best plays. But granted, when we say that, usually those end up being the 2 highest owned, right?
Yeah.
So I probably, like, even though as much as I like both of them, I might not even build a lineup with both of them in the same build, just because I feel like that's just going to be like the chalky start. Like, you can go Jennings and Pabula, and then you can get some running backs that are in the mid-range, like we're going to talk about later, and just build it from there. Like, I feel like that's just going to be the common build this week. So I probably won't go both of them. Yeah. So I see we got our guy Huncho in the chat. Yeah, he's in agreement with us that Pabula is going to be chalky. That's kind of my gut take on it, is that Pabula will probably be the highest owned quarterback on the slate. I think that Robertson might see a little bit, but I think given the choice between the 2 of them, I think people feel like us, where I'd rather pay $300 more for Jennings.
Yeah. And then,
like
then they're going to spend less to get Bailey or Pabula or Daniels too.
Yes. Robertson doesn't give you a whole lot of mobility. He's in the same game environment as Jennings. He's got a really good running back on his team. There's a lot of quarterbacks in this slate where we don't know who's running the rock for him, and the quarterback could be their best ball carrier. And Robertson's not in that situation. He's got Bryson Washington. Now, if we're thinking about it from more of a like upside ceiling perspective, I want to make the argument that the guy that, if you're really playing for upside, should be C.J. Bailey. I think he might be one of my guys this week, just because, like I was saying when talking about the game environment, like, if that game takes off, he's going to account for a ton of touchdowns and a ton of yards, because that State offense, when things were going last week, looked really good at their best. We just need them to keep their foot on the gas.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100% on that. Because honestly, I'm not as in love with Prbula as everyone else is. Because in my opinion, Daniels is better for 500 more. And
Yeah.
uh, and I know people are playing him just because he's cheap and he went crazy last week, but he was also playing Central Arkansas. And
Hmm.
we have a massive step. That's what something that I think playing in these talking about these non-conference games that a lot of people overlook. They just look at the box score
Hmm.
and they don't really consider the fact that this is not even the same kind of caliber team. In Kansas, granted, it was Fresno State and EJ Warner sucks, but they pretty much shut Fresno State down all night.
Yeah, and I think the case is with Prbula, the case that like I would make for playing him, because he's going to make some of my lineups, right? If he was 7,500, I probably wouldn't want him at all, because I feel like his floor in this game is probably about 15 DraftKings points. And at 6,100, if he has a total floor game, he's not going to kill me. If he's 7,500 and he does that, then I'm really in a deep hole, right? And so to me, that's what makes him appealing, is that price tag. I would also make an argument that I think it's probably a really good GPP idea on this slate to go for Arch. Like, I probably wouldn't play Arch in cash. I know I'm biased. I'm a Texas fan, right? Hook 'em. But when it comes to Arch, you get upside with rushing. You know that they're going to score just a boatload of points against San Jose State. And if I'm Steve Sarkisian and I see how my offense looked in week 1, I'm not taking Arch out halfway through this game. I want to get him as many reps as possible. And if that means I'm going to run it up on San Jose State, then so be it. And in that situation, Arch would just be able to go absolutely nuclear. Like I said, I don't think I would do this in a cash game situation, because in a cash game, you're paying so much for him. And his floor is honestly quite low, because who's to say that they don't just hand it to Wisner and Baxter, or score a defensive touchdown or a kick return touchdown, and then he's out at halftime. So I think he's a really low floor play, but I do think he has definitely the highest ceiling of anybody on the slate. So are you going to get to Arch this week, or are you passing?
Yeah, whenever I was listening to quarterbacks, I just accidentally left him off. He's another one that I like, and for that same reason, the it'll just kind of be one of those things. See how the ownership goes. I'm hoping he's a lot less owned because of what
Mm-hmm.
happened last week, and
Yes.
because of all these guys so much cheaper. Because I agree with you 100% on that. That this could be that they use this as kind of a practice and get him right. So I like that, and it's not like we're hurting for value that we're going to talk
Correct.
about here later.
So now I do want to say, kind of bring in some of the chat here. Myron saying the UConn-Syracuse game can be sneaky. I totally agree with that. And what I like about the idea of that game in terms of building out like a game stack or something like that is, who the running back and key wide receivers are for both of those teams. I don't even think you need to stack that game with the quarterbacks. I think if you just were to play some of the skill position players, or maybe like a wide receiver for UConn, a wide receiver for Syracuse, something like that, or a running back on one side and a receiver on the other, I think that could be a sneaky strategy with that one. That's a game that I'm not in love with the quarterbacks with, but I am in love with a lot of the skill position players with.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And then one more thing just to mention before we get too far in is just for you guys that aren't familiar with the sheets, that when there's 12 games, obviously we don't want to list every single possible play. So
Yeah.
if these are more for the people that are only playing like 3 to 5, 6 lineups or something like that. If you're playing 150 lineups, I don't mind taking a shot on Calzada or Flores or some of these other guys that aren't listed.
Yeah. And the UConn quarterback is something Italian. I can't think of it right now, like Fagano or something like that.
Yeah, Fagnano or something like that.
Yeah. He's another one that I think if you're playing enough lineups, he's worth a look.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead now. We're going to switch over to talk to the running backs. Brett, I see you in the chat. Thank you, my man. Glad to have you here tuning in live. I know you've been frequenting the kind of the whole preview videos, so glad to have you here in the live chat. And then Huncho is on it with us, talking about the receivers and running backs from that UConn game. And yeah, he's right. It is Fagnano. I just looked it up on the DraftKings slate. There was an extra N in there. I thought it was just Fagano, which would be a terribly unfortunate last name. So now let's take a look at the running backs. So the first thing that stood out to me at running back this slate, Zach, was I am not going to be playing expensive running backs on this slate. Are you in agreement on that?
I would say at first I thought I was that way, but then I started like just before we got on the show, I was making a lineup and I was able to stack the SMU Baylor game and get Singleton because of some cheap receivers. So in that case, but for the most part, I agree. Main lineups like the one guy right below Singleton, that price is just ridiculous for Smothers, 6,500. And I have a rule in DFS: if they're a guy that's going to get 20 plus carries and catch a few balls, if they're under 7,500, it's a lock city for me.
Yes, I could not agree more. And this is a slate where you have, in my opinion, not one, but two of those guys in Smothers and Willis. And like those two mid-range running backs, that's going to be where I live this week, is those two guys. And I'm going to play them both in the same lineup. I'm going to play lineups with one and not the other. I'm going to mix and match. But the combination of floor plus ceiling plus game environment from those two, you can't beat it to me at that price tag.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about DraftKings early on in the season. They don't catch up to these workhorse backs. But later on, those guys are going to be 8,000 plus every single time.
Well, and another thing I noticed too, they just today moved the game logs over. So you now can see the 2025 stats. And I kind of wish they had waited until after lock on Saturday to do that, because I felt like doing your research and knowing ball would have been more of an advantage. Now everybody can see what they did week one. And for better or worse, like people might overreact to that. But if you know what you're looking at and you know what the opponent, what the usage of the team is, then you can still build a good lineup through that. All right, so now I want to talk about some cheap running backs here. So for Iowa, I mentioned this on my show. I'm going to mention it here again today. They got two running backs. And yeah, Huncho in the chat, he's with us as well. They pick between these Iowa cheapies. So Kamari Moulton's out. He's not a factor at all. Terrell Washington Jr. listed as the starter at 3,100. And then you've got Xavier Williams, freshman, who came in relief last week. And I know some Iowa people. I'm not going to act like they're like insiders or like members of the IL collective or anything like that, but like they're guys that follow the Iowa team pretty well. And they're like, yeah, Xavier Williams looked better. Williams is probably going to be the guy at some point, and he probably has more upside, but it's still going to be Washington Jr. listed as the starter. Yeah, and I see Myron in the chat asking about Xavier Williams. Perfect timing, right? So, is that a situation, Zach, where you were going to play both running backs in your pool, both running backs in the same lineup, full fade? What are you thinking there in that situation?
So at first, I was like, okay, yeah, anytime you get a starter and another guy, min price or right there, you got to fire it up, right? Mm-hmm. But then I got to thinking, and I'm almost not 100%. I'll still have them because they're just so cheap.
Mm-hmm.
But almost want to fade just because of the possible ownership, because Iowa State Iowa is always a low scoring defensive knockout drag out. Iowa just runs the ball. So they might have each of them 10 carries for 60 yards, but if they don't get a touchdown or they split the touchdowns, and Iowa State, their run defense was really good.
Yes. Not to be discounted. Like, that's a good defense.
Yeah, and they played it was Kansas State. Yeah, Kansas State. And they basically shut down Edwards and the rest of those guys. They got beat through the air, but they shut down the run game. But anytime somebody's that cheap and is going to get 10-plus carries, you got to at least throw them in your pool.
So what I've considered doing, obviously I haven't built yet, but like when I go into my optimizer, what I genuinely thought about doing this week was doing a run through of 20 lineups and Xing out Xavier Williams and just seeing what I get of Washington, right? And whatever percentage I get of him, what I then thought about doing was literally copying and pasting those 20 lineups and swapping in Williams for Washington. And so if I get 60% Washington on the first run, then that means after I do 220 maxes, then I'll have 30% Washington, 30% Williams. That's an idea that I've had. I don't know if that's necessarily a winning strategy in the long run, but I genuinely think that at least one of them hits value for you. And I genuinely don't know how to handicap it because it's such a tough situation when you're balancing the listed starter on the depth chart and then the guy who performed better in the game. Like it's such a give and a take. And I think that for me, evening out my exposure to the two of them might be my move. I'm probably not going to play anything with both of them in the same lineup. I don't think you need to do that. But I think that getting exposure to both of them is the wise play.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I would not play them both together, and I wouldn't go all in on one or the other. Like you said, if you're doing 20 lineups and you want half and half or something, because also another guy you can't forget about that's also still way down there cheap is Seth McGowan.
Yes, who we mentioned last week.
People might overlook him.
Yeah, and he played well, and that those Kentucky running backs, they're both really cheap still here on this slate. You got Dowdell and McGowan who are cheap, and I think that they're both playable. And the irony of it is that like the presence of the Iowa running backs is going to depress the ownership on the guys like McGowan and Dowdell who are super cheap as well, because everybody who wants to play a cheap running back is just going to click the Iowa guy.
Yeah, and then you have also LaShawn Williams, who I just saw a report that he had an injury, but he's expected to play too, and he's only 4,100 for Kansas.
Yeah, I wish I could remember who it was, but I know they played an FCS opponent, and like he was like a surprise scratch. It seemed like it was one of those like, hey, dude, you're banged up. Just we got this one. Take it easy. And I don't think that would be anything that would linger to this game. So let's go ahead now and get caught up on the chat. So Darren is saying, love the show. What do you think of Drew Allar's Heisman chances? Just kidding. I don't believe how bad QB play was in week 1 ground and pound season. Yeah. So Drew Allar's Heisman odds currently plus 1,200, which means that if you bet $10 on Drew Allar to win the Heisman, you lose $10. So I can't envision a scenario where he wins the Heisman. Now, granted, I say that and watch somebody screen cap this and me end up on freezing cold takes in 3 months when he's hoisting that trophy, but I just can't see it happening. We got Huncho saying, like the idea on the splitting of the Iowa running backs. Got to think that Iowa State stills out to stop the run, and you're probably just hoping you pick the TD score anyway. Yeah, I mean, I don't fear anybody in this Iowa passing game. But also at the same time, Iowa's going to continue to try to run it. They're going to continue to try to bang their head through that wall. And if they've actually succeed, then you're going to want the guy that does it, in my opinion. And then Brett saying, yeah, LaShawn Williams got banged up against Fresno State. So we were right on that one. All right, so now let's talk about the wide receiver position. I think this is also the perfect segue to talk about a DFS concept that I messaged you about, and I said I wanted to talk about it here on the show. I want to talk about chalk in college football DFS, because I feel like if you go listen to any DFS content for like NBA, NFL, MLB, golf, everybody out there is like, oh, chalk is bad, can't play chalk. Guy's going to be 20% owned, can't play him, can't do it. Right? But I feel like college football is a little different, right? And my mentality on it has always been different based off of the price ranges. So I am somebody, and I'll explain my rationale behind this. I am somebody that I'm okay with playing top of the line chalk, and I'm okay with playing bottom of the barrel chalk. Where do you stand on playing like guys that are going to come in and project highly owned?
So my thinking on that, and real quick, just to mention on running back again on the sheet, because of the not being able to list everyone. So you have Wisner. So if you notice, anybody that's a running back by committee, it's only the first guys listed. Yeah. Wisner and Baxter, Singleton and Allen. Doesn't mean we don't like the other guys. Obviously, it's pretty much the same. Like if he's GPP, then it's the same thing for the other guy. Just wanted to mention that real quick too. But as far as chalk, I kind of tend to the guys that are higher price chalk, I'm more okay fading than the cheap ones. Because obviously the more higher priced ones, they really have to hit for you. They really have to get that 3-4x to make it. So like Darius Taylor example for
against was it Buffalo? Yeah.
I faded because had, the rest of the guys actually showed up and we didn't have Wyoming like 3-0 in the third quarter,
The pillow fight.
it would have paid off. But because he ended up being the highest raw scorer, I think, but being at 9,000, you ideally on a bigger slate, you're going to want 25 plus. And to really hurt you at that price, they're going to have to get 35 plus or 30 plus if you fade.
Yeah, so I generally agree. The only thing I will say, especially on big slates like this, is when you see a highly priced guy that's going to come in with a lot of ownership, it generally means they're just a great play. Right. And so sometimes I would rather not fade the stud that's a great play. With your example, Darius Taylor, though, I am on board with you on that 100% because I didn't think he was that great of a play. Like Buffalo's like not bad defensively. The game environment was pretty bad. And granted, the slate was so weird that he ended up hitting anyway, but the recipe was there for fading him because it just wasn't the best spot for him. Right. Like I don't believe in playing a guy that's chalk if it's a bad spot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so one example that comes to mind last week too is Michael Jackson.
Yes, I was going to get to that.
Yeah,
so you go ahead and set the table, and then I'll add in.
That's kind of what killed me because I was like, okay, I'll play him in cash because he's going to be like 60, 70% on there. But I'll go lesser on GPPs because I thought there was other cheap guys that I wanted. But it burned me because he was so cheap, and he ended up having plenty of catches and yards, and then he scored the touchdown. That was just icing on the cake because that was 5x plus at his price. And so that's where I probably want to be better at this week in my personal lineups with GPPs, like Cam Ross probably being that guy that's going to be like 30% owned in GPPs is kind of, if I'm doing 10 lineups, get at least 3 or 4 with them.
Yeah. And to kind of piggyback on that point, like the whole concept on like cheap chalk to me is like, if you got a guy that's 3K, you're going to be like, okay, if he scores like 10 to 12 DraftKings points, right? So if you play that guy and he doesn't hit, you can make up 10 points elsewhere. Like if you have a good enough lineup in your other positions, you can make up for those lost 10 points, especially if you're making up for those lost 10 points with everybody else who played him. To me, it's almost like, I wouldn't say an advantage because you're still losing out on the people who faded him, but you're not in a bad situation to beat the other people who played him, right? Like you're just making it a 7v7 or whatever. But when that guy hits, which Michael Jackson did, and you get like 6x value out of him, then you're so far ahead of everybody else who faded him that it's just so helpful to have that 3K guy that goes off. And so I don't mind playing the chalk 3K guy because of the fact that I know that I'm getting such a bigger advantage if he hits versus the faders than a disadvantage with the rest of the people who play him if he fails, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the only reason I probably would have had more, but we had like EJ Williams and a couple other guys that were around the same price that I wanted to take shots on, and we still have a little bit of that, not as much, but a little bit this week. So that's one of those things that'll kind of correct itself, and then we'll see later on in the season. The 3,500 type guy is the number one receiver got hurt, and so this guy's got to be the one going, and so there won't be as many of those pivots, and so you pretty much want to get those cheap guys on.
And then to kind of the counterbalance to this is I really don't like playing guys in like the 6-7K range that are going to be chalky, because then if they don't hit, you have to make up like 20 to 25 DraftKings points somewhere else, and that is a struggle, and you're paying salary for them, so you're not afforded the ability to go get other studs in your lineup. Like that's to me the type of chalk you want to avoid. But like I was saying, kind of the opposite of that, what we talked about with Darius Taylor. When there's a guy that's in a really good spot and he's really high priced, that's when I'll go with him. If he's not in a good spot, that's when I'm going to kind of hit that fade button. So we timed that discussion at that point in the show for this reason. And actually, Huncho saw exactly where we were going with this. I think there is a cheap chalk wide receiver this week that I'm going to be playing. I think he's a core play for you. I think he's going to be a core play for me. Tell us about Cam Ross, Zach.
Yeah, so So this is a little bit different than Michael Jackson, because Purdue, we weren't sure what to expect. We
Correct.
didn't have the depth chart, all that stuff. Now we have what we talked about last week. We have targets, we have catches, we have results to go off of. And he had 9 targets, 7 catches, 124 yards, and a touchdown last week. So he's definitely one of the top guys on the slate as far as targets go. And so the price just doesn't make sense. And that's one of those things that I think I'm going to be heavily invested in him.
Yeah, like just how many times have we seen this like Virginia wide receiver one kill it, right? Like, going back to Dontavian Wicks, Malik Washington, Malachi Fields, like it's been like 5 years now of just play the Virginia wide receiver one. And now it's Cam Ross that's there. And he's only 3,500. And to me, the whole cherry on top of the whole thing is NC State let up 300 passing yards last week.
Yeah.
Like this is just a smash spot. I don't think you're going to get better on paper cheap chalk. Now, granted, it's college football. Crazy things happen. Are we saying that this guy's 100% going to go for 7 catches and 100 yards? No, that's not how it works. But on paper, using all the numbers, all the information that we have, he looks like a good play and an incredible misprice.
Yeah, and another thing to mention is he's a 6-year senior, so he's got the veteran. He's got the experience. He's almost he's at 1923 on his yards for the year, for the season. He played at James Madison last year. He was at UConn. I remember his name from UConn, and he literally averages 12 yards a catch for a 6-year career. So
pretty impressive.
All it takes is one play, 40-yard touchdown, and he pays off.
Yeah, and so keeping up with the comments, you guys are all over it as well. Myron's saying he's got kickoff return touchdown upside too. Yeah, that's definitely a possibility, especially considering like NC State not exactly known for their special teams prowess. Like NC State, like last week, I was in the first quarter ready to be like, wow, that's one of the top teams in the ACC. And then by the fourth quarter, it's like, bro, y'all only beaten ECU by 7. Like that's just not how that game should have gone. And then, Hunt shows all over it again. Just need Chandler Morris to play. Yeah, that's the one thing we need to watch out for. We do need Morris to play for Ross to probably realize all of that upside. And then we'll get back to one of Myron's previous because we're probably going to move on to another receiver. Says a lot of folks are touting Ole Miss. My fear with that game is that Kentucky plays at such a slow pace. They did that last year against Ole Miss. I completely agree. And I think this is a good segue to talk about the Ole Miss receivers. Like, as much as there's receiving cores where we think we know who's going to be getting the ball, like Virginia, like Syracuse, like San Jose State even, Ole Miss is one of those receiving cores that I generally have zero idea who to go with in terms of a receiver. And so my only play from that game is probably going to be the running backs. I'm probably going to get to a little bit of Lacey from Ole Miss because I loved his usage in week 1. I'm probably going to be able to get to a little bit of Dowdell and McGowan. But like that Ole Miss receiver room, that's a big stay away for me. Is there anybody in Ole Miss that you're interested in, Zach?
So actually, that's kind of – this is probably going to be one of the first times in 3 weeks that we actually disagree on something.
Okay. Go for
because it. I think for the reasons everyone's saying, concerned about Kentucky and how they did last year, I think they're going to come out and they're just not going to let the foot off the gas. And we know that Lane Kiffin does that.
So you think Kiffin's going to run it up on him?
I think if he has the chance, he would. And
wouldn't
but
shock me.
I do agree with the receiver thing because Lee and Stribling, I thought were going to be 2 of the main guys.
Yeah.
And then you had Harrison Wallace, and I don't know if that's going to stick. But I think Lacey's too cheap. And I also like taking shots on Simmons because he's cheap as well.
So if I can rant about the Ole Miss receivers real quick. So like we hear all spring, all summer camp, oh, Lee was so good last year. He's ready to take the next step. He's ready to be, kind of the more the Trey Harris role. Stribling's coming over from Oklahoma State. He's so talented. He's so good. We're drafting these guys in best balls in the 5th and 6th round. And then they come out week 1 and all they do is throw to Harrison Wallace, who the last time we saw him, he was not getting a single catch against Notre Dame. a single catch in that game.
Yeah.
He could not get one. Leonard Moore and Christian Gray had him on lock. And now that he's at Ole Miss, all of a sudden we're supposed to believe he's the wide receiver 1. Like, I'm not buying it yet. If it burns me this slate by fading him, I'm willing to live with that. If he does it again this week, I might have to start paying attention.
I'm actually pulling up because I have the subscription to Pro Football Focus. That's where we get these targets to actually see the snap counts. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, because I mean, like Brett's saying in the chat, Kiffin loves rotate receivers, especially when he doesn't have that one guy. So, plus, there was a lot of extended run for the 2s in that game, where Simmons was out, Lacey was out, and so it's really kind of hard to tell who was playing with who. But what you got for the overall snap?
Okay, yeah. So this is something that might be sneaky, honestly. Stribling was on the field the most of any, 30 pass plays. He ran a route on 29 of those. Lee was on the field 26 pass plays, ran a route on 25 of them.
And I feel like most of that was with the 2s.
Yeah. And so Lee was out of the slot 20 of those 25. Stribling out wide 27 of the 30. And so they both only combined for 5 catches. So that could be, if it's one of those things, people chasing Wallace. He was actually 4th. He was only out there 24 plays. And then another guy that they always like using the tight ends is Daquan Wright.
Oh, yeah.
I like him.
So now, yeah, I'm still probably staying away from all of them. And if it burns me this week, it burns me this week. I can hop back on later. Yeah, this week, that's just kind of how I'm going.
Yeah, let me see what the prices are real quick.
Let's
Lee is 67 and Stribling 6,000. So that's definitely one of those things you're just hoping that you're guessing right. And apparently Daquan Wright is also questionable. So if he is,
that would bring in Caleb Odom if he was out.
Yeah, or Trace Brookler, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So they're both mid-price, so that could be something to look at.
So let's go ahead and go now. Let's play our favorite game when we talk about wide receivers on here. Not going to do this for every team because that would take all night. But let's play pick one. All right. So let's talk about the Baylor guys. We talked about how Robertson is a guy who is not all that mobile. You want to stack him. And they've got 4 receivers, genuinely 4 receivers who are in play. You got Josh Cameron. You got Ashton Hawkins. You have got, he's somewhere on here, I'm pretty sure. You've got Ashton Hawkins, and then you've got Cole Wilson and Michael Trigg. If you had to pick one of them for this slate, who are you picking?
So if I had to pick one, it's a tough one because I kind of want to go Hawkins or Cameron just because Cameron's the most expensive, and so I feel like people are going to be off of him. But the guy that was just a machine was Trigg. He had 16 targets. And for that price, that's just insane right there. And then Cole Wilson was cheap also. He had 11 targets. But the only thing is Wilson was actually 5th on the snap counts, and he only ran a route 34 times, and Hawkins 52 times, and then Cameron and Trigg 46 times. So there's kind of a discrepancy there.
Yeah, I think the longer the week goes on and the more that you see projections come out, you see ownership come out, the more it leads me to buy a bounce back on Josh Cameron. I think this is a really good buy low spot. I think he's going to be low owned. I think you have plenty of salary to do it. That's going to be the one I rock with this week.
Yeah, that's kind of what Brett's saying in the chat here too.
Yeah.
Have to get Cameron more involved.
Yeah, it's the ultimate buy low spot, right? All right, so now let's go to the other side of that same game. And then I got one more team I want to ask you about. So the other side of that same game, we got SMU. Romello Brinson was the breakout in week 1. This is a team that has really struggled to find a consistent wide receiver 1 over the last 4 or 5 years, really, ever since Rashee Rice left. So maybe not 4 or 5 years, maybe like 2 or 3. Maybe I'm just getting old. But ever since Rashee Rice left, they haven't really had a wide receiver 1. And Brinson looked really good in week 1. They've also got the tight end RJ Maryland. They have also got Jordan Hudson, not Bill Belichick's girlfriend, Jordan Hudson. But there's
He's
plenty of
actually hurt
options
this
there.
week.
Hudson's hurt?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's
That's good
not
to know.
expected to play. Yeah.
Okay. So if that is the options, are you going to continue to buy on crap, I lost his name. Brinson. Yeah, are you going to continue to buy on Brinson, or are you going to go with somebody else?
So the guy I don't think he's actually on there. I just kind of, I do a last second research and stuff for the show after school on Thursdays, and I stumbled upon him, especially with the Hudson news, is Jalen Cooper. He's min price. He had 6 targets, 5 catches, 73 yards, and a touchdown. And he was actually right below Brinson. Brinson had 30 snaps, 28 routes, and then he had 27 snaps and 25 routes. I don't know about if I can trust any of the other guys. It's one of those two, but I'm just leaning Cooper because he's min price.
So that's interesting because when I recorded my show 2 nights ago, we didn't have the Hudson news that he wasn't going to play, right? And the realization that I had made was that all of Cooper's stats came in the later part of that game. And I'm like, yeah, he was doing it with, in garbage time. I'm not going to chase that. But now it's like, wait a minute. He wasn't just doing that because it was garbage time. He might have been doing that because Hudson was banged up. And so if Hudson misses, I think that does bring Cooper into play.
Yeah, but I will say one thing, and Myron kind of mentioned it just mainly on the running backs, but it pretty much goes for all SMU for me.
Yes.
Like you said, they're so hard to narrow down because ever since Rice, they don't have that guy. Everybody thought Maryland was going to go, but Hibner, the other tight end, was actually the leading route runner on the team. And then they're going to have like 4 or 5 running backs that could touch the ball. And so that's why I'm just really high on Kevin Jennings, because he's going to eat so much. Whoever he's throwing to, if he could throw to 6 different guys, but he's getting the points.
And you don't need to stack Jennings either because of the mobility. But yeah, I think it was 2023, the year after Rice graduated, where Preston Stone was the quarterback and they won the AAC, but they didn't get the New Year's Six bid, where you could not play any of their skill position guys because they just rotated the running back so much. It was like LJ Johnson was one of them. And then at receiver, it was some of these same guys. It was some of the guys that were there last year too. Like I want to say there was a Curly involved. There was a white guy involved. I don't remember his name, but it was definitely a white guy name. If anybody remembers that in the chat, let me know. It was definitely like a basic white guy name though. And you just couldn't play any of them. And now it would be cool if we could actually play some of these SMU skill guys. And Brinson could be the guy. And I think if we do get news on Hudson, then playing Cooper is an option as well.
Yeah, and Cooper's a 4-star prospect. He's a fresh.
Yeah, he's not just some scrub.
Yeah, it's not just some min-price guy yeah.
So the other one I will ask you about, this will be our last pick one. We'll talk about the core, and then we will get on out of here, is this team is really interesting to me. Missouri, right? Everybody's going to want to play Pribula. Pribula's mobile, so you don't have to stack him. But if you want to, there's options. There's a lot of options. So we got Kevin Coleman, the transfer from Mississippi State. We've also got Marquise Johnson. And then we have also got Joshua Manning is another option. So is there anybody in that Missouri receiving core that really stands out for you?
So I got to be honest on Missouri. I haven't looked too into them, so I don't want to lead anybody astray here. Just pulling up some of their stuff. It looks like it was pretty spread out that first game.
Really, Coleman and Johnson were the two that kind of performed the best, but they played a lot of guys because they could have throttled that team if they wanted to.
Yeah. So I always just kind of when it's spread out a lot, I kind of tend to lean towards the cheaper guys. Mm-hmm. And Norfleet looks like he's going to get targeted a lot as the tight end. He's about 4,200. Yep. But it's just one of those things, which I'm sure we're going to talk about here in a minute, but it just kind of depends where I'm ending up in my lineups. If I'm around, 6,100, well, then you could just plug in Coleman and on a particular lineup.
Yeah. And, with Prebula and us being pretty confident that he has a lot of rushing upside, I don't think you need to stack him. But if you do, I'm kind of leaning Coleman. I'm with Brett in the chat. I think that Coleman is the guy. I just think he's the most talented out of all of them. And then Brett also helped me out in the chat. Yes, Jake Bailey, I believe, was his name.
Yeah,
I was right about that being a basic white guy name, right? Like ain't nobody named Jake Bailey that isn't white. So, all right. Anyway, let's go ahead and wrap this up by talking about the core. If there's anything you guys also want us to specifically hit in the chat, let us know before we get on out of here, right? But Zach, you've got your fave four, and I gotta say, I haven't fully published my core yet, but I can tell you right now, there's two of the guys in yours that I'm gonna have in mind. Do you want to guess which two?
Ross and Smothers.
Ross and Smothers, yeah. So I'll go ahead and start with Smothers. So, excuse me. I'm all for paying for workhorse running backs in college football DFS. And you get a guy like Smothers that has basically no carry competition in a great game environment, and he's only 6,500. Yeah, sign me up. This is just not very typical of something that you'll see in midseason. He's not going to be 6,500 very long. So Smothers is going to be one of my guys for this slate. All right, so now I'll let you take up the mantle here, Zach.
Okay.
Why Jennings?
Okay, so Jennings, well, one of the glaring points that you can see is just a little bit further down with the totals. It's a literally touchdown higher total than any other game. And the one game, Texas Tech, you're only going to want to play
one
some
side.
of the guys on the, you're not going to want to stack that game. And Baylor, I personally have always been a big fan of Kevin Jennings, and I think he is, in my opinion, and you might get at me in the chat, but I don't care. I think he's better than Jackson Arnold. And Jackson Arnold destroyed Baylor. So in my opinion, he's going to have a great game. And he's pretty much had great games, and it's like Clemson in the playoffs last year. He kind of struggled a little bit. He's looking for that breakout game against a top-tier team, and this could be it.
Yeah, and I'm going to back you up. I actually think that at this point in their careers, Jennings is better than Arnold. Now, could Jackson Arnold, with Hugh Freeze coaching him with a elite receiver room around him, could he take that next step? Yeah, but I ain't seen it yet, and I'm rocking with Jennings for now as well. And really the only bad game we've seen Kevin Jennings play was against Penn State, and this is not Penn State. The lasting image of Jennings last season to me was when he was playing Penn State and he couldn't hear the play and he was covering his ears so that he could hear, and it just made the crowd louder. But he's not going to be dealing with that at Baylor. This is not that level defense. Is not that level of competition. I think Jennings is in for a pretty good game as well. I just have yet to decide if he's going to be my favorite quarterback or not. He's making the pool. I don't know if he's making the core yet, but you made a really good argument for him there. So I'll go ahead and pick us back up with Cam Ross. I mean, we talked about him ad nauseum. That price tag, that role, the game environment, the talent, it all matches up. And I think that that's a guy that you're not going to want to miss out on this week. And I'm, we kind of talked about it earlier, but I'm comfortable playing a ton of him. And if he misses, I'm comfortable with that because I did my research. I know that it's a good play, and I'm comfortable with missing if he does miss because I just don't think it's very likely that he misses.
Yeah, that's one of those that I'm not going to make that mistake like I did with Jackson last week. So just definitely Ross and Smothers and Jennings, you probably want to start there if you're doing cash. You definitely don't want to fade Ross in cash. He's going to be like 80% in that. Yeah,
and to kind of expand on what I was saying, when you play DFS, you kind of have to know your own mindset and your own mentality. You have to make decisions on what am I willing to get beat by? What am I willing to miss out on? And I'm not willing to miss out on Cam Ross if he goes off at 3,500 in that situation against that defense. I don't want to miss out on that. And I'm willing to, if it burns me, it burns me. I'm willing to accept that. Right. All right. Now you tell us about this last guy, because this is a guy that I'm not sure I'm as high on as you are. So make the case for Jaden Ball.
Okay, so one thing I want to mention before I get into why I'm playing him, but uh, what I like to do, I've noticed that kind of works good for both college football and basketball, is I like to lock in on three guys that are chalk that I think are good chalk with Ross, Jennings, and Smothers. And then I like to get that fourth guy, that kind of lower owned guy that I think people are overlooking that has the upside. But I also, with the fourth guy, they're the ones that can be more flexible, right? You can go Willis, you can do other guys. It's not one of those that those other three, if I'm playing 10 lineups, I'm going to have him at least 60% probably. He's probably, 40%. But granted, it's Long Island, but he averaged 12 yards a carry. He had 100 yards in just 9 carries. And yeah, he's going to split a little bit, but he's still fairly cheap. And I'm not buying South Florida all of a sudden being back because they beat a Boise team that has nobody. Like Boise, I've never been impressed with Madsen anyways. But then they lost all their receivers. They don't have a running back. They lost Genty. And so they just kind of look lost out there. And so I think Ball could have a good game. And one of those guys that when you're looking in the range, you have Baxter, and then you have Willis, and you have Cam Edwards, which I also like Cam Edwards too. And I like Willis. I don't hate any of those guys. But as we mentioned earlier in the show, the guy that I think most people are playing is they're going to see all those guys, and I think Willis is going to come in lower on too, which is the guy you like, and they're going to skip past him and go to Whittington. And I think that's the bad chocolate.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think, thinking about South Florida, like when I watched that game, because it was on at 5 p.m. So that was when I actually was able to watch a lot of, believe it or not. It was one where I had on the phone and both the kids were still awake. I was watching after both of them, but kind of had the phone just over here to the side. And their offense is what impressed me, not their defense. I think Boise's offense kind of beat themselves. And so I think that the South Florida offense, I think they're going to be able to score some points. I think they're going to be able to keep this game remotely close, which should help Jaden Ball. It should also help Eugene Wilson, because if we know anything about Eugene Wilson, he's a big play guy. And I think that, one of Ball or Wilson is probably going to have a really good game. And if you're able to pin down which one at a price tag where neither of them is probably going to be super chalky, I think that can be one of the keys to the slate, is getting one of those guys right.
Yeah. And to kind of go along with that, mentioning I like Edwards and Willis, that's where I think another way to get different is I personally like playing 3 running backs in single entry and cash games. And so people are going to, like we already talked about, throw in that cheap Iowa guy. Play these 3 guys that are 65, 62, 6,300, and that's different right there because it doesn't have one of those cheap. Because I personally would rather go with 2 cheap receivers with Ross because he's basically a free square, and then like Cooper.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a way that I will build probably a lot this week is 3 running backs, because I feel like the 4 receiver way to go is when you want to play like pocket passers and you want to get like 2 receivers from the team, or you kind of just really isolating certain game environments. I think when you have a slate like this where there's very few like quality running backs, but the ones that are there are like really quality, I think that's when I want to make sure I'm getting the 3 running backs.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So let's get caught up on the chat, and then we're going to close it on out right at 1 hour, right on time. So yeah, some Brett saying Ball got pulled early. Yeah, that's what I saw as well. But it seemed like, watching the highlights, because I'll be honest, I wasn't watching Florida Long Island, but I went back and watched the highlights to see what these guys were looking like. He looked really good. And I think he could do that against South Florida as well. We got Myron saying this is a nice slate for week 2. Just wish the afternoon slate games would be better. Yeah, I don't know why DraftKings doesn't put more games on the 3:30 slate. Like, I'm totally cool with having a 12-game noon slate, but then the 3:30 slate, you can do games that aren't on the main slate, DraftKings. You can throw in some other games. You're saying UTSA, Texas State. Absolutely. That game's going to have some fireworks. And it kind of stinks that we're not going to get to play that. There's another one. Western Kentucky is playing Toledo, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. I think it's Western Kentucky, Toledo. That's another one that I think I would be in for if it were on the slate, but it's not. So yeah, as we get kind of further and further in the season, the game predicting, or the game selection, I should say, will be a little bit more predictable. But yeah, this is not a bad week 2 slate that we've got. There's not as many blowouts as they could have had. Whereas week 1, it felt like was really blowout city for a lot of the slates.
Yeah, I definitely like this one a lot more because to me, fade Penn State, because other than Hudson, because he looked good last week, and Texas Tech, people are going to be on them, but they have so many guys, and you're banking on, the starters playing the whole half and be up 56-0 at half like last week, and they just went off because Eakin and Douglas didn't, and they didn't pay off their price for what their price is right now.
Right. All right, so now last thing, I'm scrolling back up in the chat to find it because I remember him saying it. So Darren saying he's going to watch the rest of the show, but he's wondering if we could dress your number 1 pick in the snake draft contest this week with no salary. So first off, if you're not aware, DraftKings is doing snake drafts now for college football. My win rate the first 2 weeks, week 0 and week 1, has been really good. Like, I don't think I'm necessarily like a genius at it. I'm just like going based off what I know and the players I like. But I feel like there's people in there that are not really building optimally and not really knowing what they're looking at. And so maybe if you're watching this show, if you're somebody who is interested in the inner workings of DFS, go try out the snake draft format because it's been good to me. And I hope that it'll continue to be good to me. So yeah, if we're looking at no salary involved, just raw fantasy points, I'm probably rolling with Arch. Just because I think his upside is unlike anybody else on the slate. But if you weren't looking at Arch, I'm probably going Kevin Jennings. Are you on board with that as well, or are you thinking elsewhere?
Yeah, that's what I would agree with. I think on the snake, you want to get the guy because obviously salary doesn't matter. So you want to get the guy that you think for sure is going to get the 25, 30 points. And you can draft, you can get 2 quarterbacks. So you could probably get Arch. And then there's so many other ones, you could probably still get a solid, decent guy. Because especially like you mentioned, people may not know Jennings. And I've noticed, I don't know on the big slate because I didn't play on the big slate, but on the showdowns, I was drafting against guys that were drafting 3rd and 4th string quarterbacks just because they were listed on the list. And so, and I believe on the main slate, Texas's quarterback, their backup is up there.
Trey Owens,
yeah, people could be doing that, and you could end up in a situation where you could get Manning and Jennings possibly if you got a bunch of morons in there.
Yeah, and with the Superflex format too, I definitely think you want to go with 2 quarterbacks. Like, there's like no excuse to me in snake draft to not get 2 quarterbacks when there is 24 of them available and you're doing like 3, 4, 5, 6 man drafts. Like, you're not doing a 12-man draft. You're not going to have to get the Kent State quarterback to be on your team. Like, you're able to pick from the best of the best quarterbacks. Go get the best ones, and then piece it together with the running backs and receivers that you like. Like we already mentioned Smothers, we already mentioned Willis and Ball. Like those guys are going to be available to you at very like reasonable cost in snake drafts, and make a lot of sense in that format to me.
Yeah, and I agree completely. I would almost say, I haven't tried it. I think I may try one tonight just to mess around.
I recommend it.
I'd almost say take both quarterbacks first because people are going to get the Wisner and the Singleton and these other guys. And so Jennings, like you said, or Smothers and Willis and those guys are going to be there in the 3rd and 4th round because people are just going with the guys at the top.
Yeah, and sometimes you can kind of see how a draft is going to unfold. Like if you're in a situation where you've got you're the number 1 pick in like a 4-man draft, so you're going to get pick 1 and pick 8. You definitely want a quarterback at pick 1 because by the time you get to pick 8, it might be looking a little different at the quarterback position. And if it does, like if everybody around you is already taking quarterbacks, you could be afforded to wait on quarterback and load up on running back and wide receiver, but you're only going to have that option if you really pay attention to what the room's doing and know kind of how to read and react to that. So that's my other piece of advice is read the room when you do these. And then also, I think that generally stacking is a pretty good idea. Like if you're going to be drafting Sawyer Robertson, I think you got to kind of boost up Josh Cameron, because if Robertson has a good game, a guy like Josh Cameron's going to be having a good game as well.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, so I think that's going to close us out here. So, yeah, if you're sitting there watching us live still, thanks for tuning in for the full hour. I see we got a weather delay on Thursday Night Football, which is not something you see every day. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in on this NFL kickoff day. Help us out. Hit the like button before you go. It helps me out so much on YouTube. Helps people find the videos. Helps people find the channel. And just generally helps grow the community. So make sure you hit that like button before you go. And then Zach, tell the people one last time where they can find your work, like the sheet we were looking at for the last hour.
Yeah, so they can. You can follow me on Twitter at Big Country DFS. I'll post them on there. And then also in the Fantasy Corner Discord and the Big Country Discord. And so once you go to the Twitter, you can look at the pinned post, and it'll have the link to the Discord. So,
yeah, all right. Well, make sure you guys go follow Zach. Because Zach, correct me if I'm wrong. Were you doing YouTube streams before we started ours in week 0?
No, I actually haven't. So I don't know how much time we have before we wrap up.
Just go ahead.
Okay. So I started out probably 7 years ago, just playing DraftKings at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then, then I started doing articles. That's how it first started before the sheets. Started doing articles, and I was actually for 2 or 3 years in a row, I was a finalist for Fantasy College Sports Writer of the Year for the FSWA Awards.
Mm-hmm.
Never actually won it, but just kind of cool for that. But then with time and job and life and everything, and I noticed that people don't really read the articles anymore. And so they like the sheets because it's so visual, it's breakdown easy, and it's really easy to do. And we got a lot of guys that help on it, making them, putting the guys in there, especially when it comes to college basketball, because that's a grind every single
day.
So that's kind of how it started. And so I've never actually done the YouTube here and there, but never actually committed like this until you've joined me, having me join you. And so I appreciate you.
Yeah, and I'm thankful you're coming on, because like doing a show like this is so much better to do when you can actually talk about with someone else, bounce ideas off, get the discussion going. I love doing the overview shows that I do solo, but like, doing a solo show is not for the faint of heart. Doing one of these, like, this is what I look forward to. It's fun, kind of going back and forth, getting the discussion going. So I'm very thankful you've been able to join us 3 weeks in a row now.
Yeah.
Which, considering both of our schedules, is impressive.
Yeah. If you guys saw our chat when we're trying to figure out when to do this, and I'm like, I'm busy this day, because I also do stuff with high school football. And so every Friday is just gone.
Yeah. And for me, because I used to coach high school football. Now I do girls flag football, which honestly is the best. Like, I like it. It's so much fun to coach. That's going to be taking my Saturday morning. So I'm going to be in a boat where, like, I'm not going to be available before lock coming up here pretty soon. So I'm going to be putting the lineups in at like 10 a.m. and just hoping and praying that there's no late scratches and that screw me over, because Lord knows I'm not going a day without playing. And I'll just take my chances on some of those injury news. So yeah, that'll be interesting when that happens.
Yeah, or to just be out there on the field and, oh, let me change this real quick.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of calling a play, like, oh crap, Cam Ross is out. Yeah, which totally just first name that popped in my head there. Please do not think that Cam Ross is out on Saturday. All right. Well, anyway, that's going to do it here for us, guys. Thank you guys for joining us live. Thoroughly enjoyed it. We'll hopefully be back next week. Like I said, we both got stuff to schedule, stuff going on, but hopefully we'll be back next week. If you're subscribed to the channel, if you're following us on Twitter, you'll know when we're going live, and you can be in here to tune in and hop in, join the discussion, ask the questions, get whatever you needed to ask. But Zach, great show. Really enjoyed it. Everybody in the live chat, thank you guys for joining us. Best of luck to you on the Saturday slate, and we will see you guys next time.